What is up, everybody? This is the very first episode of the new podcast, The Left Lane Zoomers. I am Harry Rawson. These are my fellow co-hosts, Malcolm and Alex. And today we are going to talk about a story that has been quite big for the last week, and there's been a lot of developments in this story. It is concerning Donald Trump's use of federal troops in Portland as well as Chicago and other major cities, and we're going to talk about the developments concerning that, concerning this whole thing, including legislation in the Senate that was written by both senators from Oregon, and also some revelations about different tactics that the federal troops are using while they're in these cities. So first off, I'm going to start with a clip uh, from CBS Evening News, in which it talks about this whole just talks about the situation in general. Right.
We mentioned today, President Trump announced he is sending federal agents to Chicago to fight the outbreak in violent crime there, using a briefing on the coronavirus to justify that. CBS's Weijia Zhang is at the White House tonight. Weijia?
Nora, for the second night, President Trump held a coronavirus briefing alone, ignoring criticism that he should let the health experts do the talking. Late this evening, the mayor of Chicago said the president has already failed in responding to the pandemic and claimed he's diverting attention away by interfering in her city.
Thank you very much.
President Trump announced the administration is sending hundreds of federal agents to Chicago to curb violence as part of a new anti-crime initiative called Operation Legend.
This rampage of violence shocks the conscience of our nation, and we will not stand by and watch it happen.
Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot has said she won't let federal troops terrorize her city.
That's what we call tyranny and dictatorship, and we are not having it in Chicago.
The move follows more than 100 federal officers decked out in camouflage storming Portland, Oregon. The Department of Homeland Security has also sent over 200 agents to Kansas City, 35 to Albuquerque, and plans to send more in the weeks ahead. Mr. Trump is promoting himself as the law and order leader as part of his re-election campaign and accusing presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden of planning to defund the police. Biden disputed that.
I am opposed to defunding police. Matter of fact, I call for putting more money in.
So there's a lot to unpack there. What are your thoughts, Malcolm?
Definitely. My thoughts are concerned with specifically with Joe Biden's response to his defunding the police message. I think he's sort of ill-informed about it, or maybe he's trying to cater to his base to try to gain some of that support. But the thing is the argument's not necessarily about taking all the resources away from police. It's like allocating the overfunded resources to the community to stop violent crime.
Yeah, I think there needs to be like a general understanding about like what defund the police means. It doesn't. I mean, like there's probably some people like on like some fringe people who say that we should completely abolish the police. I mean, I'm not sure I'm quite with that position at the moment. I probably could maybe be convinced, but at the moment, I do think we do need to at least heavily defund it the same way we need to defund our military. But yeah, like we need to like convince people that, you know, defunding the police is not about abolishing the police. It's not even necessarily about like the police. It's about like moving funds away from policing and towards community programs that can help with poverty, education, healthcare, all the above. And that can actually help solve crime in a way too, because, you know, poverty is what drives people to crime, like typically. I don't know, Alex, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think you are both right on Joe Biden. I think anyone with any sort of education on this issue understands the importance of, defunding the police or abolishing it. I think the more important thing is about Donald Trump, because if this isn't the definition of fascism, I'm not sure what is. You know, the employment of the state military, and local townships and whatnot. I mean, that seems, well, it's not only blatantly authoritarian. I mean, it's right wing, it's fascist, it's Trump at, I think, his most right wing. I don't think we've seen him quite as this. What do you guys think?
Well, I think so, definitely. And then sending troops in places like Chicago and Albuquerque and Mexico to help, quote, bring down violent crime. We've had this before. Even under Obama, there has been federal law enforcement helping every time there's a spike in shootings in the summer. How has that necessarily changed anything?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've always held the position that we live in a dystopian society, and I think it's just becoming more and more overt now. I mean, I'm not seeing reported on the front pages of big papers the stuff about Portland. I mean, maybe they are being reported, but I haven't seen in like the New York Times or Washington Post, extensive stories on this. Though it isn't being buried. So, I mean, you have to wonder how pacified our population must be such that they can, understand that this is going on kind of in the back of their mind. And,
Yeah. And it goes beyond just like the secret police practices in which like they're literally abducting people. Like I mentioned to you before we started that there was a story, I think it was from Politico, about how they are using surveillance drones in these situations. And yeah, that is very authoritarian. Like we like to and especially like with all like the conservative people who like to stand with Hong Kong, and full disclosure, I am pro Hong Kong. Like they like to say like China is like being super authoritarian with their like facial recognition technology, police brutality, but they're silent when it comes to how it is with the situation in America. And it's like, I mean, like it's like it's American exceptionalism, I guess, is like the best way I can describe it. It is American exceptionalism. Usually that term is used when it comes to like the conduct of our military in other countries, but I think this definitely applies.
Well, and for some reason, all of this seems to be buried under several layers of irony in America. It's very easy for us to like make fun of how Jeff Bezos has all of our information from Alexa and stuff like that. Like, I think we all understand that our freedoms and our liberties are being violated. But for some reason, like, I mean, I guess we've just been so insanely pacified that, we're just kind of sitting back and letting it happen. I mean, this is a perfect example of that.
Definitely. I think the concept of individualism in American society does play that role, because we don't necessarily pay attention to issues unless it affects us personally.
Yeah. Like I think it was in Gov class. Ms. Strong was showing, no, it was the student teacher who was like doing the lesson at this point. She was showing us a political cartoon. It was Homer Simpson watching like a campaign commercial, and then it said, under my presidency, I will bring you I will fight for increased foreign intervention, tax cuts, increased drone surveillance, or like increased government surveillance, and a whole bunch of other bad shit. And then you see Homer Simpson say, "Ooh, tax cuts," like because we need, and that brings up another thing. We need to convince people how this would eventually affect them personally before it actually does, because surveillance just like giving the government like surveillance powers may not impact us in a negative way immediately, but if we keep giving them keep allowing them to do that, eventually it will start to affect us personally. You give the police that much power, they are going to eventually, they are going to abuse it, as we have seen them abuse it. It's just a matter of when it will like get to us in a personal level. You know what I mean?
Definitely. Yeah, there was some videos like a month ago on Instagram where a sheriff in Oklahoma almost banged in the door of a resident when a lady called to like help her family member with a mental health issue and a gun drawn. So it definitely does play a role because we often talk about like drone surveillance. We also have extended qualified immunity over the years and also increased funding.
Mhm. Well, we also need to be very clear about what the police really are. I mean, they're, um, because, people like to say, oh, the police, stand in the way of lawlessness. They're agents of the law. Really, they're state employees, and their job is to enforce, state and federal law. Um, and they're given, and of course, if you go into the history of the police, it gets a lot darker. But even just staying there, I mean, maybe this is just my own ideology coming out, but I don't think anything good can come from state agents. Because the police definitely do have a service and a purpose in our society.
Yeah.
I think it's necessary, but they definitely do serve one. Um, it's kind of like the old, I mean, it's the tale as old as time. It's power corrupts. It's the old cliche, but it turns out to be true.
Yeah.
Anytime you give someone, especially an entire institution, the power to uphold the law, already they're immune to that law. They're given certain immunities. They can act, in their own way, as we've seen them do, as they're doing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's where I do think that we often say in American society, no one's above the law, but we just treat police as if they're above the law, giving them qualified immunity when there is no immunity for unjustifiably shooting or beating people. And especially proven now, as we've seen in Portland and other places across the country, where they're just attacking innocent people or not rioting, throwing cocktails or Mazel tovs or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, who's starting all the violent protests? It's the police. It's never the protesters.
Yeah. What I thought was actually kind of funny is that the Fox News has been reporting on these protests like just everyone else has, but like the thing is, like, even today, like, when the George Floyd protests first started, I think it's fair to say that there were a fair share of riots, but like those have definitely died down more into like peaceful protests now. And these days, Fox News is still using riot footage from when the protests first started. And I
didn't know that. That's insane.
Yeah. That definitely lacks context, because if we even look at local news, we looked at the George Floyd protests. Most of them were peaceful. Most people weren't throwing like bombs and stuff into the precinct. There were like 4 protests across the city, and like Fox News is only showing one part. Tells you a lot about their agenda and how they're trying to justify Trump doing this.
Yeah, and on top of that, where are the police dealing with the riots, like the actual rioters,
Exactly.
right, while they're picking fights with protesters? I know, I understand that there are some probably very good cops that actually want to do their job to the best of their ability. I just don't see them, and I don't know where
And
they
even if
are.
there are, even if there are, I don't think it matters because this is an institutional issue.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
And I think it's interesting. So like we talked about, like Alex dealt into like he said that police do serve a purpose, and I absolutely think that they do. So I think it is important to look at how other cities are working to redefine the role of the police. And I think, and I need to do more research into this, but apparently, so there was a story recently that Minneapolis, as a result of the killing of George Floyd, had completely disbanded its police department, and they're going to try to work with something new. This seemed new to me at the time, but then apparently I heard about Camden, New Jersey, who hasn't had like a typical police force for over 7 years, and they've been, and like I need to work into like researching what they are doing currently, but you know, I don't know, it'll be interesting to look into that to see like if like, you know, if starting over completely like is a realistic option. And just look and just, you know, Camden, New Jersey's still there. You know, no one's really talked about like how high their crime rate is or whatever. Like because, you know, I don't think it is. But yeah, there is that, you know, like, we really need to be focusing on the question like, do we want simple reform, or do we want to like start over, or like just not have police in general, which I think is a little bit too extreme. But I don't know. Thoughts, anybody?
Yeah, I think we should have reform ending qualified immunity, actually holding officers accountable if they break the law. And then we should also focus on more so kind of like defunding overfunded police. Because at the end of the day, that really putting more police on the street doesn't solve crime, doesn't fix the crime issue.
Yeah.
It solves the homicides and stuff, which are like very few of the arrests, if you look at it in general. It solves those crimes, but it doesn't stop it from happening. You're just locking people more up. And then if you add the prejudice of being a convicted felon, they're just going to reoffend again, and that's going to continue the cycle of crime. It's like places like we see in Chicago.
Yeah. And yeah, like, you know, when you put more funds towards policing, and same with the military, that is taking away funding from things that will actually help everyday people. And, you know, like I said, like it drives funds away from things that would help the community. And that, so in a way, increasing police like funding actually increases crime in a way. You could like indirectly increases crime. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, on paper, since more people are being arrested. I just want to say like one small thing that's inconsequential, but for the party that claims to be in favor of small government, they sure like pumping money into the military and the police.
Yeah, definitely.
That's why I have, like, even though I think some libertarians are quite unrealistic, I do have more respect for them because at least they tried to be consistent.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it just kind of shows that the Republican and Democratic Party are the same. They're exactly the same ideology. The party split is a political phenomenon.
Yeah.
And on the topic of like abolishing or defund, I'm in favor of abolishing the police.
Like no police at all, like not even replacing it, right? Or I don't know.
I mean,
I'm not making assumptions. I'm just asking you to elaborate.
so I don't know exactly how it's going to work. I think the first step is to defund it. I've recently started reading The Conquest of Bread by Kropotkin again. And it's kind of, you know, it's lighting up the anarchist sides of my brain again. But one of his main points is that you can't go after each institution one at a time. You have to do it all at once. Otherwise, otherwise you're going to have interference.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing about abolishing the police, is if we were to do that, we would also have to say go after the military industrial complex. We would also have to, we'd have to come up with some sort of measuring and managing crime. We'd have to deal with the prison industrial complex as well.
Absolutely.
There are issues bound together with this, and it makes it more difficult to tackle.
Yeah, I do understand where you're coming from. But like my perspective is more of an economic perspective. So it's kind of hard to relate to the kind of philosophical point of view you have. But I do like understand like your point. So
yeah. And that is a problem with like progressive reforms in general. Not like that I disagree with them, but the issue is that a lot of these progressive reforms can't really, like there are many progressive reforms that can't really work without having another related progressive reform in place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
yes, 100%.
Yeah. So like we really gotta like take on all. I'm not saying like don't fight for these for these progressive reforms and like progressive ideas. Like the exact opposite. That's why we really need to be hardlining on them all the time.
We also need to understand the scope of the battle, because there are people like Joe Biden who say, oh, we should give more money to the police, because he clearly doesn't understand the issue.
Yeah,
But
Yeah.
at the same time, to those people who want to defund the police, I think they need to understand the broader implications that that has with regards to the prison system, and things of that sort.
Yeah.
definitely, because it's gonna collapse the prison industrial complex because there's gonna be less people in prisons, and it's gonna like withdraw the funding the government gives to those private prisons.
100%.
And I think that's generally speaks to like why, like even though like the issue of uh human rights in this regard like is it is more divisive than it should be, because I think people like have they're like people on the different sides do have like they're not all on the same page about what the scope of the issue is, right? Like and that is best exemplified with Colin Kaepernick's kneeling controversy, because like he was kneeling because he wanted to bring awareness to police brutality. That was generally what he wanted to do with that. But a lot of people saw it as like forgot just like forget that, like that's very disrespectful to the flag. They saw it as a very different issue than what Kaepernick and those who supported him saw it as. So like how do you think we can better get Americans more on the same page about the scope of the issue? Like what methods would you propose like for the government and activists to do to try to get everyone on the same page as far as like just the general scope of the situation and like in general?
Well, I think so. I kind of look at it in context in history as well, because like, let's say major events. Many people in our society did not support ending slavery, but it was necessarily the minority that had pushed for power to end it. With, of course, like the Civil War, try to like have an advantage where Lincoln needed it to destroy the Confederacy. And if we go later, maybe many people didn't agree with women voting, but it was like that minority that was politically organized that gave them the right to vote, saying basically, oh, it would be like kind of like bringing the concepts of Republican motherhood. When you look into civil rights, there was a poll, barely 50% of Americans agree with the Civil Rights Bill. Other 50% were very skeptical, but yet it was the black political minority that used these events of violence and kind of the UN, like to bring attention to these, put pressure on America to pass these laws. I'm not at all saying we can't convince people. I do not think that should be our primary goal. Is more so getting politically organized to get laws passed necessarily.
And then when those laws get passed, let them speak for themselves in a way. Like
Yeah,
yeah.
because we at the end of the day we can't really change people unless they want to listen or be informed. So I definitely do agree that if I want to learn more about Black Lives Matter or any other issue, defund the police, like, we definitely should educate those people and explain more to them. But like the ones that are like, like the Billies you said earlier, that just like turn their head, don't want to listen, we just have to let them go, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely see that now that you explain it.
I couldn't agree more, and I would add to that saying that, of course, all the violence that we're seeing now is, by the police is horrible and wrong, but it could end up, giving us some political currency, in the context of the broader movement. I'm slightly optimistic that the stuff happening in Portland and Chicago might catch the eye of, the average American and make him, really start to think about this issue.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I think it already is like,
Yeah.
Yeah, because like I watch some late night TV. Colbert is currently my favorite, was talking about this secret police situation.
Mhm.
So I don't necessarily think it is getting buried. I think it's to the point where like even those who would typically try to hide it under the rug, or like hide instances of police brutality under the rug, are like, yeah, this is definitely not okay. We should be outraged. And we definitely saw that with the George Floyd killing as well, because, you know, like we could see the video, like he was saying, I can't breathe. And he just kept his knee there. And, you know, even like, yeah, people who I saw, like both friends and pundits, like, you know, professional pundits who typically try to defend police and saying like, oh, he did what he felt like he had to do. And like, you know, they saw that and said, yeah, this is not okay. And I think that is encouraging in a way.
Yeah.
Well, it's weird because we have this advantage of, you know, the internet and social media, such that, you know,
Yeah.
like every police, abuse of power ends up in front of our faces on our screens. But at the same time, it desensitizes us because we see so much of it, and also we're necessarily detached from it since we're only seeing it through a screen.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword. There are advantages and disadvantages. I'm not sure. You see, like, part of me is really hoping that it's just that the sheer abundance of information and the sheer abundance of education that people are, you know, being force-fed will be enough to facilitate the movement forward. But another part of me thinks that, you know, people are so passive, they're just going to keep on watching this over and over again and just be, you know, horrified.
Yeah. And like you see it with like mass shootings too. You know, like we're seeing
That's
like,
a perfect example.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we're being overly desensitized to that stuff. So yeah, I definitely see your point. We need, and you know, and oftentimes reality is a very painful and uncomfortable truth that may like go against like everything that we were like basically in a way indoctrinated into since we were kids. You know, like I remember.
It's also tough to figure out what reality is, you
Yeah.
know, hindsight. So you have to just kind of like look at your options and kind of guess.
Yeah, and that's why like in schools, like George Carlin talked about this in a stand-up set. I think it was his last stand-up special actually. Like he said like it's not enough to teach children to read. You also have to teach children critical thinking, like how to question everything they read.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Well,
to vet through the bullshit.
The school system we have was developed by this guy called Horace Mann, and he borrowed it directly from the Prussian model in the late 1900s. The purpose of our education system is literally to indoctrinate the youth. So it's called the factory model school system, and I have very little hope in the ability for our schools to teach critical thinking.
Yeah, and they keep saying that schools are indoctrinating our children into communism. If anything, it's indoctrinating us into the exact opposite.
Neoliberalism. Like, yeah.
In Miss Pruitt's class, we read Anthem by Ayn Rand, like in my sophomore year.
I don't remember reading any political literature in school. Maybe 1984 could be counted as political literature. Not really.
Yeah. I don't know, like
crazy. Ayn Rand.
You both have already gone through. You both have gone through sophomore year, like I did. Did you have to read that book?
No, I never had to read Ayn Rand.
No.
We also read Animal Farm, which
okay.
I mean, like the thing is, it was people like to say that. I don't know, like it is very much like an anti-socialist book, even though it was written by a socialist. But like it's definitely like an anti-Stalin book.
Right.
You know,
yeah. People conflate Stalinism and Marxism a lot. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and there's also there's different schools of that kind of thought as well.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of got off topic from police brutality, didn't we?
It's like one small point that doesn't mean anything, but like, if you were going to try and like provide your students with a politically balanced narrative, I wouldn't think George Orwell would be the leftist analog to Ayn Rand. But I don't know. Yeah. I'll just sit here drinking my tea judgingly.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Yeah, but I do think our school system is getting better with that. Because I did notice in APUSH this year, they were kind of like bringing up like multiple narratives and stuff. Like, and you had to make an argument, kind of think critically.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I'm hoping. I mean, I'm hoping that our school system can. I mean, I'm noticing like a shift away from the strict factory model. You know, in that teachers are, you know, at least in my experience, have been more interactive with their students. But
Yeah, and also
no,
like the regular,
break out.
yeah, the regular conduction of like debates and discussions
Mhm.
concerning issues, both like themes in literature and also in history and government classes. We have those discussions and debates a lot. And
Yeah.
since I picked out my college classes yesterday, I'm gonna be taking both knowledge and reality, which is a philosophy class, and U.S. government and politics. I expect to be doing a lot of debate in college, and
Well, and in order to critically think, you need to provide students with the right information. You know, I mean, I don't need to. You all know about the history of propaganda in this country. I'm sure you know how it's
Yeah.
bested the
yeah,
schools and everything. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, that
plus
seems to
like
be
World War II.
you need to provide students with accurate and enough information, which isn't being done.
When they do some, they need to do more of it. But like, remember when they take you to the library for a quick 30-minute lesson on finding accurate research sources? They do more of that because like, even if you see on Instagram, you have a whole bunch of trolls using like miscontextualizing statistics, cherry picking and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
Mhm.
they talk about like black on black crime, or like like
Yeah.
white people are killed
Yeah.
killed in higher
That makes
number,
sense.
like in higher like raw numbers by
Yeah.
police than black people, even though you really got to like think about like the population, the difference, and like the, and like how like white people make up like roughly like 60% of the American population, like white people in general. I think that's the number last time I saw it.
I have a lot of doubts that these are really honest actors, though. I mean,
Yeah, they're more so
Absolutely not.
estimates,
Yeah.
so I don't think we should take them for like the God-fearing truth, because in reality, we cannot measure how many Americans there are by race, gender, ethnicity, because not everyone participates in the census.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Not everyone is able to.
When
Yeah.
I was just gonna add, like, I mean, if someone, I think if someone really wanted to get educated on this issue, they started, looking up statistics and stuff, they would not say, that white people are killed, in more raw numbers than black. I mean, it's just, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that they're looking for statistics and evidence to justify their ignorance. Say,
Yeah,
oh,
it's like
I'm
like
educated.
confirmation bias.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe it's unconscious, but I have a feeling a lot of it isn't. I think a lot of them know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah. And
Yeah, I
even though
do feel they
yeah,
do.
yeah. Even though there is definitely a racial disparity when it comes to police brutality, police are like just in general like have a habit of mistreating people in general. So like when people like to use the statistic, police kill, like they like to say like police kill more white people than black people. They use that as an argument to show that police brutality isn't real, when in reality it doesn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there definitely is a
Yeah, no, I
yeah,
didn't even think about that.
yeah,
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 they're kind of using it to, like, normalize, because like I was reading this article, it's like about it's like this representative conservative. When they were talking about people like Breonna Taylor, they just mentioned people like Duncan Lemp and like white people killed by police. But like, thing is, okay, if you're talking about that, wouldn't you want to pass the bill because it helps them as well?
Wouldn't you be
Yeah.
upset that police are killing
Exactly.
people?
Like, wouldn't you be upset that like that it was targeting white people as well? Like,
I mean, I
that
know,
would help them.
I mean, I'm a white
Yeah,
male
but
that's never in very much danger, but if I pull up to a stop sign or a traffic light and a cop pulls up next to me, I'm going to stiffen up, and I'm not even all that worried that he's going to attack me.
yeah, like
So,
even though it just disproportionately affects black people,
yeah,
it still like it benefits you at the end of the day to pass the bill.
Right. I mean, exactly. Like, I've never known very many people to support the police until all of this started happening for some reason. So I think it's less that they support the police and more that they're totally all right with black people being murdered.
Yeah. Or
I
like
mean, because
either like all right, or just they're not willing to like, like really like talk about why this is a problem, like mostly just like intellectually lazy people, I could say. Yeah.
I mean, I remember even like 4 or 5 years ago, or maybe even less, conservatives almost never talked about the police, or if they did, it was like, oh yeah, small government, we should. But now it's like, oh no, we need the police. We need more money in the police. They're heroes. Their lives. It's like all of a sudden they're an oppressed minority in their eyes just because now they're not allowed to kill black people.
Yeah.
Well, they are. It's being challenged.
Yeah, and like I said, like increasing police funding to fight rising crime rates, that's kind of a paradox in itself, because when you fund the police, like what I said earlier, like when you increase funds toward that are going to police, you take away funds from other things that the community needs, that increases poverty, and then it indirectly leads to more crime. And so
here's an idea for the Republican Party. Maybe they could take money out of the military budget, federal military, and put it into the local police budgets. No, they'd never do that.
I love Barbara Lee. For our viewers who don't know who Barbara Lee is a black congresswoman from California. She is the only person in the House who voted against the Afghanistan war, and she recently proposed to cut the military budget in half. Like she I don't know, like she's actually like drafted a bill for this, but she tweeted about it and said, like, let's cut the military budget in half. And that alone,
even further. I mean,
that alone, like a serving politician saying that we need to cut the military budget in half. That itself is like typically like unspeakable of.
I've never heard a Democrat say anything like that.
No, never.
Yeah.
They're usually on it. Like that bill that passed recently, Donald Trump's going to sign, where they increased the funding. Democrats go on that too on both sides.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. Republicans are very much partially responsible for much of like the injustices that are like currently happening like in our system in general, not just with policing, but like pretty much every other aspect of life. But Democrats are the ones who are just letting them do it. The Louis Black said it best. You have the Democrat Party, which is the party of no ideas, and you have the Republican Party, which is the party of bad ideas. And that I know that's a little overgeneralizing, but overall it's like the Republicans are the ones coming up with this terrible legislation. Democrats let them do it. Nancy Pelosi is signing the check.
I just recently heard Kyle Kulinski say, in America, you have a choice between the Republican Party and the Diet Republican Party.
Yeah.
Which I think is a pretty funny way of putting
it. There was a story earlier this week that you may have heard of. They invited John Kasich to speak at the DNC.
Oh, yes. I did hear about that.
And then, whereas another figure from Ohio by the name of Nina Turner, I absolutely love her. She was, I don't know if she was set to be speaking at the DNC. I think she was set to be speaking at the DNC back in 2016 because she was a top Bernie surrogate. And I guess that they wanted to like show party unity or whatever. But eventually they canceled her and said like, so, like they kicked her off the list. It's like, so like the supposedly progressive party is reaching out to John Kasich, who called for what is it, a moratorium on all regulations. He was very he was very homophobic, and like during his time as governor. And they're going to like kick out Nina Turner, who is a state senator, during part of the time in which John Kasich was governor, I believe. and she is for like all these progressive policies that most of the Democratic base is in favor of. They just decided to go for Joe Biden because they viewed him as the most electable or whatever, and I think that argument is absolutely stupid. So and
It's not
that's
even supported by evidence.
yeah.
I mean, there's no way.
There's no way to measure electability.
When the people were saying that Joe Biden is the most electable, what they were really saying is Joe Biden will appeal to both Democrat and Republican donors. That's
And he's going to appeal to the kind of like the white conservative base as well.
Yeah. Well, he's essentially a Republican.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the conservative Democrat in the Senate for, I think, the entire time he was there.
Yeah, like
And
he passed a
people-
crime bill.
Yeah, and people like even Biden forgets this. That is why Obama picked him to be his VP. Not because he was like he had credit with the black community like he said he would, even though being vice president to the first black president kind of gave him credibility with black people and like in some cases.
Right.
But he was picked by Barack Obama because Obama said like, let's not scare the old white people away with a relatively young black man.
Just a mindset you must have to have if you honestly believe that Barack Obama chose you because of your clout with the black community after you spent your career working with Dixiecrats and segregationists like Strom Thurmond.
And also think about what he said about Obama during that primary. Joe Biden was in that primary as well. And he said, oh, it's really remarkable seeing this young, articulate, sophisticated black man running for office. Is like, he didn't realize how patronizing that was. Like, oh God.
Oh, geez.
Like, there's been many people before that, Obama, who have done that, like, throughout our history.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like...
what was it? Jesse Jackson? He ran back in the 80s, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Al Sharpton ran in 2004.
Al Sharpton had a well-known campaign.
Yeah. Then Shirley Jackson ran in the 70s.
Yeah.
Oh, Shirley Chisholm, but yeah, Shirley Chisholm. I got the last name wrong. Yeah, but she ran for president.
Let me do a Google search.
But yeah, that's interesting.
Oh, she was the first black woman elected to Congress. Yeah, she's real important.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, the person was it the person who like Joe Biden was referring to in that one debate? It's like the only African no, he accidentally said African American. I get that was just like a slip of the tongue, I guess, but like he said the only African American woman to be elected to the Senate endorsed me, and then Kamala Harris is like, "Hi, I'm right here." Like the second one's over here. Like
I feel like he's trying to like tokenize that.
Yeah.
Like,
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it wasn't for Obama, like he basically latched onto Obama like that. If he wasn't able to do that, Bernie would have been running against Donald Trump right now. And that is like, and
well, I mean, it's hard to say though, because I mean, if someone else had won South Carolina, if I'm not saying they would have, but if Buttigieg had won or whatever, I think they would be the nominee right now. I think a lot of effort was put into supporting Joe Biden after he was the first candidate to win a state that wasn't named Bernie Sanders. Yep. I think because everyone was surprised that Joe Biden.
Think about what you said, Alex. Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar winning South Carolina, a majority black state, when they were the most.
Well, it's not majority black, but like.
I'm not saying they would, but if they did, I think they would be the nominee right now, is my point.
Yeah, but my thing is, like, for the Democrat Party in South Carolina, black people make up a significant portion. When we look at Amy Klobuchar, her record for prosecution isn't that good.
No.
And if we look at Pete Buttigieg, he didn't even deal with the, police issue in his own mayor as mayor. So people will find it hard to believe he's going to do that as president.
That wasn't so much the point of what I was trying to say. Choose whatever candidate you want who you think could have won South Carolina. Had they won over Joe Biden, I think they would be the nominee right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Biden had just had in the very end had just edged out, more minority support for him than Bernie Sanders. So I do think that if Joe Biden had not been in the equation, Bernie would have won South Carolina. And he looked like he was going to win South Carolina for
If Joe Biden
for a
had run
short
in
time. For a short time, he looked like he could win South
It
Carolina.
did. It looked like he could win every state for a while. If Joe Biden had run in 2016, I think he would be president right now. I think it's a shame that he didn't run when he was mentally capable. So now we're just going to end up with, sorry, this whole thing just frustrates me. I don't understand why he didn't run in 2016 when he had a sound mind.
I would have not.
I do.
I mean, I don't know. I just don't like Joe Biden that much in general. I'm gonna vote for him. I'm gonna hold my nose while I'm doing it.
Yeah, but I do feel like he did drop out because due to like COVID-19 and stuff. But I felt if there wasn't a pandemic, Bernie Sanders would have a good chance to like actually win the Democratic primary.
Yeah, or I think even
That's actually a good point. If the pandemic had happened a little bit earlier, Medicare for All would have appealed to a lot of people.
Joy Ann Reid from MSNBC, the most anti-Bernie person ever, who was always like, "Yeah, I don't know about Medicare for All." She's expressed support for Medicare for All recently because like when you're in a situation where when healthcare is tied to your job and everyone's losing their job, do you really want to continue with this current healthcare system? Do you even want to keep it? Not are you sure you just want to simply reform it and not just replace it with something new? And if you look at the other, if you look at Italy, it handled the virus very poorly, but not one of those problems that led to all the deaths that were caused in Italy were the one problem that was non-existent in Italy was lack of health coverage, lack of supplies, maybe.
And if you look at Italy now, Italy's doing pretty good right now.
Yeah.
It's America, the only developed nation in the world without universal healthcare that's suffering the most.
Yeah.
And I think everyone knows that.
And we pay for other countries' healthcare. I think we even pay for Israel's healthcare with the money that we send their way.
We give $50 billion in foreign aid a year.
Yeah.
To almost all countries around the world, $50 billion in foreign aid.
Yeah, and especially Israel. I'm not surprised at all that we pay for Israel's healthcare.
We pay for a lot of stuff with Israel. And
Israel, a big reason it's the most powerful country in the Middle East is because of its American support.
Yeah, but we can't talk about that. Allegedly criticizing Israel now is anti-Semitic, according to
I just remembered. Yeah, we can't speak about this later because 10 years into the future, they're gonna look back at this hear us criticizing.
Idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's it doesn't make any sense to me. The idea of a religious ethno-state suddenly needs to be respected around the world because the people who want to establish it were persecuted to a tremendous degree. That doesn't reasonably follow to me, especially
not
when
even
you take
we're criticizing a religious ethnicity. We're criticizing Israel's right-wing government and our nearly sycophantic support for it. And so again, that's another example of just not being on the same page.
Yeah, it's we're not attacking people, we're attacking the government. They even called Mark Lamont Hill, who was Free Palestine, and was fired from CNN for saying that at the UN, anti-Semitic.
Yeah, and that gets to another thing that has been.
The reason they're able to get away. The reason they're able to get away with saying it's anti-Semitic is because it is a religious ethno-state. It's the state of Israel was reserved explicitly and specifically for Jews, and that's the reason they can say it's anti-Semitic. But that's childish and that's silly.
Yeah, and that gets what you said about Mark Lamont Hill. That gets to another thing that has resurfaced, another topic that has resurfaced with these protests is cancel culture. And I think Mark Lamont Hill, as well as many others like Ed Schultz, who was fired from MSNBC for covering Bernie Sanders' campaign, or Phil Donahue, who was also fired from MSNBC for speaking out against the Iraq War. Jesse Ventura, who was going to have a show on MSNBC, was against the Iraq War, so they just paid him and he didn't get to do the show. He said it was like the easiest money he ever made. But
Nice.
the problem with cancel culture is typically like there's many problems. People like view criticism towards them for a position that they hold as cancel culture, and like
Right.
and like
Like someone,
yeah, cancel culture, like I guess is really considered when someone receives like professional consequences, like all the people I cited who lost their jobs or like weren't able to get a job.
Yeah.
And that was so like Barry Weiss being criticized for like defending Israel, like that's not cancel culture. In fact, she rose like in like she rose up through the media totem pole by like when she was in college. She was trying to get Arabic professors who were pro-Palestine at her college, like she was trying to get them fired. And like I don't know if they actually did end up getting fired, but like that the point is like Barry Weiss is a hypocrite. But yeah, like, and generally like the real victims of cancel culture are like it's the left. Like it's not the right, because like our systems are very slanted towards the right. You might receive a whole lot of publicity shit from the public, but you're not going to be actually canceled.
Yeah.
Right.
Like this, like especially now with the Republican Party, they control the Senate, they control the White House right now. There's really nothing policy-wise people can do to really do that. They can just socially make consequences for you, but like they can't really change the power dynamic.
Mhm.
All right, so now we're getting to a somber section of the show. So like this past week we lost two very important figures. They worked at very different levels of like they had very different work, but their message essentially was the same about being kind to others, an advocacy for justice in a progressive society. And those two people are Representative John Lewis and left-wing media commentator Michael Brooks. John Lewis was with Martin Luther King back in the 60s. He was one of the original freedom riders. That's what they're called, right? I think.
Yeah, Freedom Riders.
Freedom Riders. He served like for decades in Congress, and he was a real advocate for civil rights and social justice. And then you have Michael Brooks, who was a left-wing YouTube commentator. He was the co-host of The Majority Report with Sam Seder. And then like a few years ago, he started his own show, and it was just getting ready to take off. And, personally, a very big influence to me, part of the reason why I wanted to start a podcast in the first place, because I wanted to take after them and thought I could contribute something in a way that they have. So yeah, and it was John Lewis's death was more or less expected. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer back in January, and it was diagnosed in stage 4. So pancreatic cancer in general is typically a death sentence, no matter how much money you have to afford treatment. Whereas Michael Brooks's death was quite sudden. Like he had just been streaming the day before. Like his channel was uploading content that day. And it was his sister said it was a blood clot that killed him. So both of these losses very heavy, and two very important voices were lost in the progressive community. So, Alex, you were also a huge fan of Michael Brooks and Sam Seder. Do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I mean, I've I've been watching a lot of Michael Brooks this last week, like a lot of old clips. At first, like, stuff like him dunking on Dave Rubin, but, later, like his interview with Lula and, some talks he's given at some schools. And I don't, like, I mean, I knew this when he was alive, but, it takes, I mean, what is that old adage? You don't know what you've got until it's gone. He was really a philosophically conscious person. He had a way of viewing things from, a perspective that you definitely agreed with and could understand, but might not have come up with on your own. And just like looking back, like watching his videos, I mean, he was so smart. It was so well spoken. I can only hope that, the future leftist kids will find him on the internet. I wish I could say something about him that other people haven't. It's upsetting to me that, I mean, he was in his prime and he just died randomly and suddenly and tragically. It's aggravating because of how, he could have held a really important place in, the leftist internet movement, and he did, but it could have been a lot bigger.
Yeah, like John Lewis had his entire life. He lived to be 80, and like he was able to accomplish so much. His work is still unfinished. His work is still unfinished, and we still need to continue that work. But yeah, like I wouldn't have been surprised if Michael Brooks had lived to be 80 like John Lewis did. He could have risen to a state of notoriety that John Lewis had. And
yeah. I mean, just his knowledge of foreign policy, especially, I mean, just surpassed like most public figures on the left.
Not
even
just foreign policy, but just like the politics of foreign nations, like
especially things like Brazil and Israel.
Yeah. Someone said like he knew more about Ecuadorian politics than any person on CNN knew about American politics. And
100%.
Yeah.
And that's like one of the things that I really liked about Michael Brooks was that he didn't let the media cycle dictate what he covered or what he was reading or what he was interested in. He always just kind of pursued his own, political routine, and he shared it with people, and it was really great.
Yeah,
Definitely.
It was definitely. This is definitely like a weird time to actually start this podcast. Like, so I'm hoping to continue this podcast in a spirit of trying to give back to the world what we lost with John Lewis and Michael Brooks. So like as
Definitely.
like their voices are being taken away, we're hoping to add ours.
Yes, especially at the time where November 3rd is coming up. It's kind of like a unfortunate loss we have because we lost two influential people that could have helped with the election. Yeah,
and that's the other thing. Michael Brooks was very much a Bernie supporter, but when Bernie lost, he didn't spend a whole lot of time fretting over it. He just looked to the future, said, okay, let's think, like, what is our future going forward? Like, what is the next thing? We lost this battle. Like, what do we need to do going forward? And that was the optimism that Michael Brooks had, and John Lewis had too. Very much differed from other figures on the left because I watch a lot of Kyle Kulinski. He's a very pessimistic guy, but Michael Brooks very much had an optimism about the future, and I'm going to we're gonna end this podcast with a couple of clips. One for John Lewis and one for Michael Brooks. The clip with John Lewis was when he was talking to John Baptiste from the Stephen Colbert show in a barbershop. And the other one is Michael Brooks when he was on a panel at Harvard with Cornel West and a few other progressive figures. And both of them in these clips talk about the need for compassion and to understand and the humanity of others. And my computer's about to die, so we really gotta hurry it up, I guess. But yeah, here are those clips.
In 1961, the same year that President Barack Obama was born, black people and white people couldn't be seated together on a Greyhound bus or Trailway bus, leaving Washington. And in May of 1961, my seatmate was a young white gentleman. The two of us left Washington, and we arrived at the Greyhound bus station in Rock Hill, South Carolina. A group from the Klan beat us, left us lying in a pool of blood when we tried to enter this so-called white waiting room. Now this is May 1961. Many years later, to be exact, in February of '09, one member of the Klan, one of the guys who had beaten us in his 70s, came to my office in Washington with his son in his 40s. And he said, "Mr. Lewis, I'm one of the people that beat you, your seatmate." He said, "Will you forgive me? I want to apologize." And his son started crying. He started crying, and I said, "I accept your apology. I forgive you." They hugged me, I hugged them back, and I started crying. And that's the power of the way of peace, the way of love and nonviolence. As Dr. King said, hate is too heavy a burden to bear.
Hate is too heavy a burden to bear.
Yes. So we just, love is a better way. So all of the people that beat me and arrested me and threw me in jail, I don't have any ill feeling at all. Not at all. I feel free.
I feel good, I feel free. Congressman John Lewis, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, indeed.
I just want to add that thank you, and it's an immense honor to be here, including definitely with Dr. West, who is an influence on me. And one of the major reasons that he's an influence on me is because of that synthesis and the ability to hold multiple truths, that we have to have some sense of a capacity here to do something with democracy, and then also not lie and deceive ourselves about what we are and what capitalism is and what empire is. I came across a speech fragment from Martin Luther King Jr. recently, which I played on my show, and I don't know where or the title of the speech, but I thought it was so important because we've put a lot of work, and we still have to put work into reminding everybody that the man was on the left. He wasn't a guy who came out once a year and said everybody should treat each other nicely. He was a serious... But the other thing that I loved about this speech, which was he talked about the fallacy that certain Christians misunderstood love as a ceding of power. And then Nietzsche came along and rejected Christian morality because he thought it was denying someone's vitality, the will to power in a healthy sense. And he said, love without power is sentimental and anemic, and power without love is abusive and corrosive. I'm paraphrasing. And that was when I saw it, I thought, well, here, okay, we know the left wing Dr. King. Well, here's the Machiavellian Dr. King, and I love it. I want the left to have Machiavelli so that we can have the strategy, the ruthlessness, the clarity to actually win these battles and be ruthless with institutions. And then I want us to learn how to be really kind to each other, welcoming of a broad set, and actually have a movement that has the capacity to do that. That's why the cancel stuff is relevant, that Katie brought up, because it's a stand-in for this eliminationism of other humans, which is neoliberalism enacted. And it's also a contradiction from when we get utopian. It's beautiful. We're the people who sit around and we say, why don't we have a world where there's no prisons? Okay. That's a radical fucking statement. That's a real thing, and we should take it seriously. But then, on the other hand, oh, well, these people could never be part of our coalition because they made a mistake or said something. Like, it's a contradiction in what we're enacting. So what I get that I hope is in the realm of answering your question from this Dr. King clip was left-wing, spiritual, but also with a vision of power. And if we can synthesize those things, I think we will speak to the highest impulses of this country. We will be welcoming to people, and we will win.